Jewish Channel's Week in Review. The Obama administration's charm offensive hits its target with Jewish leaders, when Jewish jokes become public policy, and the first female Orthodox rabbi speaks out. It's the Jewish news that's changing your world on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. The past week is noteworthy for progress on the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, with U.S. and Israeli representatives working together on solutions. That might seem a stark contrast from just a couple of weeks ago, when Jewish and Israeli leadership was expressing strong discontent with the rhetoric and priorities of the administration of President Barack Obama. And yet, on Wednesday, an announcement was made that U.S. Mideast envoy George Mitchell would meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss the start of proximity talks. This came a day after the president himself had lunch with Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, who'd criticized Obama's approach to Israel in full-page ads in the New York Times and other papers just 2 weeks ago. Wiesel emerged from the lunch meeting stating, "The tension, I think, is gone." And the meeting with Wiesel came just a few days after Israel's defense minister, Ehud Barak, told an American Jewish audience that, quote, "the slight disagreements are behind us." All of this comes so soon after many in American Jewish leadership were asserting that U.S.-Israel tensions, which they blamed on the Obama administration, represented an historic shift. So what's changed? The JTA has the answer in its headline on the Wiesel meeting, declaring White House charm offensive pays off. The article, in somewhat tongue-in-cheek fashion, details how providing administration speakers at Jewish events discussing the historical and continuing friendship between the U.S. and Israel is what's turned Jewish leaders back. And while all this news details the simple ways to get Jewish leaders on board with the White House's agenda, it's also possible that the news of the past week reveals a true divide between those in Jewish leadership and average American Jews. As we discussed in our newscast 2 weeks ago, all the public disputation between the Obama and Netanyahu administrations hadn't really changed how much American Jews approve of Obama's and Netanyahu's handling of the U.S.-Israel relationship, though their disapproval numbers had risen noticeably, largely owing to a change of mind from those who'd answered not sure to the same question 6 months ago. So if more than 90% of American Jews hadn't wavered in their opinions as the Obama and Netanyahu administrations fought publicly over 6 months, the rather wild swings in opinion from Jewish leadership in just the past few weeks stand out. Based on surveys, it doesn't seem that their expressions of alarm about the Obama administration reflected mainstream Jewish opinion. And given that the Obama administration was speaking only to these Jewish leaders when it made its conciliatory statements over the past few weeks, it seems that their change of heart doesn't reflect mainstream Jewish opinion either. That's an interesting difference to keep in mind as discussions of the peace process continue. And now, I'd like to interrupt this serious discussion of policy with a joke. A Taliban officer is stranded in the desert and comes upon a Jewish merchant. The Taliban officer begs for water, but the Jewish merchant explains he only sells neckties, and that the restaurant down the way is where he can purchase water. The Taliban officer stalks off, only to return to the Jewish merchant some hours later and says, "Your brother, who owns the restaurant, won't let me in without a necktie." It's not the funniest joke, but it was part of National Security Advisor Jim Jones' speech to the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. That speech was part of the Obama administration's charm offensive, but in the case of that joke, there was less charm than offensive, according to Jewish groups like the Anti-Defamation League. Was the joke anti-Semitic, inappropriate, simply a case of one more bad joke from a politician? Might it even be funny? With a story like this, we decided to avoid comment from Jewish leadership and go to the real experts, comics. Chris Needon has that story.
President Barack Obama opened his speech at last weekend's White House Correspondents' Dinner with a punchline about his vice president's use of profanity following recent passage of the healthcare reform bill.
He leaned over and he said, "Mr. President, this is no ordinary dinner. This is a big meal."
A joke that went over fairly well with the audience, as in the press. But that was a far cry from the reaction Obama's National Security Advisor, General James L. Jones, received for his opening joke poking fun at Jewish stereotypes, which he told at a recent Washington Institute for Near East Policy event. The joke was criticized by Abraham Foxman of the Anti-Defamation League and was removed from the White House's official transcript of the speech posted on the organization's website. Jones later released an apology stating, "I wish that I had not made this off-the-cuff joke at the top of my remarks, and I apologize to anyone who was offended by it. It also distracted from the larger message I carried that day, that the United States' commitment to Israel's security is sacrosanct." In light of the controversy, TJC asked some local comedians what they thought of the joke, starting with the fact that Jones's mostly Jewish audience actually laughed at it.
further. They not only laughed, they clapped, right? These people, people laugh at jokes, but rarely do they clap at a joke they don't like.
But there is that true thing that I can talk about my Jewish mother, but, you know, if my friend who is Irish Catholic was like, you know what, your Jewish mother is so Jewish, I'd be like, back off!
You get like a get-out-of-jail-free card, maybe if you're like married to a Jewish person or something like that, but something tells me he is not.
Now, I'm not Jewish, so maybe I don't know every little insulting thing there is, but for me, it was like you could have inserted any ethnic group in there to make that joke. That's how I viewed it. It was a funny joke. It was like a switcheroo, you know? It was good.
And what did the Jewish comics think of the joke?
I think it's a good joke. It's a funny joke. I mean, especially, again, factoring that this guy is a soldier. Do you know a lot of funny soldiers? I don't.
You know, it's not like this guy wrote a joke. It was clearly a joke that someone was like, you should try this. And he's like, okay.
In southern Afghanistan, a member of the Taliban was separated from his fighting party and wandered around for a few days in the desert, lost, out of food, no water.
And then he stumbled through it. And, I mean, I laugh, I chuckled or whatever. It's fun. It's just based on a stereotype, and it's a clever street joke. We call it a street joke, where it's not like, you know, it's like an internet joke now, I guess you would say.
I would like to see how it plays in front of a Taliban-only audience, though. That would be the real test of how funny that joke is.
To hear the rest of the joke and more responses from our comics, please tune into the broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Well, that's all for this week. For more news and analysis from the Jewish Channel during the week, please check out our blog at newsdesk.tjctv.com. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable: IO Optimum Cable Channel 291, Time Warner Cable Channel 528, RCN Channel 268, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and Cox Cable Channel 1. For more information, visit tjctv.com.